This is the Fantasy Football Game Plan, where we talk about fantasy football and the NFL. Do you want us to go from worst to first, or the other way around?
Oh, like you mean 2021 worst, or I mean 2020
Well,
worst?
Worst I feel confident that the Texans aren't going to win the division. Put it that way.
Okay. So are they the worst? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's a toss-up. I mean, we got Jacksonville. I like some of the things that are going on in Jacksonville because they've got a coach that can actually coach this year. They've hired Barry Peterson instead of that clown that they brought in from college football last year that thought that it was recess or a play date or something. I don't know what the hell his problem was, but he was horrible, that guy. But so they've got a real coach, Barry Peterson, and he's good. He's quarterback coach. He coached Carson Wentz to a great Super Bowl season with Nick Foles. I mean, neither of those quarterbacks are that great, but they managed to beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. So that's good coaching in my book. Mm-hmm. So I like Trevor Lawrence coming up this season because I think he's actually a talented QB. And, obviously he's not a first round pick, but I wouldn't mind having him as my number 2 QB on my roster. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess I'll have to see the offense. Really, like maybe he's a waiver wire pick because his receiving core is sort of questionable, and the passing game was kind of out of not even existence with their offensive line. So if they address their offensive line, and Christian Kirk being a big signing for some guy that was like 4th string in Arizona, and Marvin Jones being a receiver who he is, maybe Trevor Lawrence should be someone that we could consider, but I wouldn't go in and say I'm drafting him late in my rounds. I would rather pick another position or a different quarterback than Trevor Lawrence. But hopefully they get what they need because I believe that they did get a rookie tackle or something like that as first round pick. Who was the first overall pick?
I don't know. I don't know who they drafted as their number 1 pick. Probably you're right. It's probably an offensive lineman.
Yeah.
One of the things they did do to shore up their offensive line was they brought in Brandin Scherff from Washington. And he's an all-pro guard. He's absolute stud O-lineman. Mm-hmm. So, they've got, you mentioned Christian Kirk. They've got Laviska Shenault Jr.
Yes, rookie from second-year player, and he was doing really well last year.
Yeah, Swiss Army knife kind of a guy. He can do a lot of things, a gadget guy. It's really fast. And, they brought in Evan Ingram from the Giants, who's a pretty decent tight end. So they've got a couple of decent tight ends because Dan Arnold's still there.
Yeah, I was going to mention Dan Arnold. He was on our list a couple of times last year when we were speaking about Jacksonville, if they ever came up.
Yeah, he kept getting hurt, but he showed a lot of promise in the games he was in. And then their running back situation is just something that really confuses me here because they've got James Robinson, but they don't like him. I think he got injured towards the end of last year. But at the beginning of last year, they had Travis Etienne, who they drafted high, and he got hurt and never played at all.
Yeah, which was weird that they picked Etienne up, considering that Robinson had such a great performances for 2 years. So, yeah, their running back room is a little bit confusing. I would agree.
Yeah. So, like on this team, if you had to pick one guy for your fantasy team from the Jacksonville Jaguars, which guy would it be?
Probably that Shenault Jr. as like a bench. And maybe one of the running backs as like a number like 4th, 5th round, kind of depending on what position I'm drafting in. They would probably be like a 3rd or 4th pickup. So definitely bench players for this whole team.
I'm going to say that I would like to have Trevor Lawrence, and that I think good things are going to happen for him now that he's in a better situation with a professional coach. And as I said before, I wouldn't take him as my number 1 QB, but I would roster him as my backup, my number 2.
Nice. Well, you're also in that paid league too, so if you get him for cheap, that's a good strategy.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, well, let's move on then. The other bad team in this division is the Houston Texans. And I'm looking at these guys. They have got, I guess, Davis Mills is their QB.
Who?
Davis Mills is their quarterback. And he was, of all the rookie QBs last year, him and Mac Jones were the 2 best. And the thing about Mac Jones is he was on a decent team. Davis Mills was on a crap team. And he still outperformed all those rookies that got all the attention in the draft. And, you know, I think he's actually a pretty decent player, but he's surrounded by crap. I do like Brandin Cooks, the wide receiver for Houston. I mean, he's sort of a safe pickup every year, right?
Yeah, definitely. He doesn't go flying under the radar, but he is someone that kind of gets overlooked because the team he sits on. But definitely a performer and obviously a starter.
Yeah. I mean, they have Philip Dorsett, who's a name that we're all familiar with, but I don't think he's going to make a big splash in fantasy football this year. But I remember last year, a name that came up quite a bit for our waiver shows was Brevin Jordan, the tight end. Do you remember us talking about him quite a bit?
Oh, yeah.
So he's a guy to keep an eye on. I mean, I wouldn't spend a lot of capital on him, but, you know, number 2 tight end, he's sort of a draftable player. I think he might be okay. The running back room on this team, though, I don't know. They did draft a guy, Damien Pierce. I guess he was a 4th round pick. I feel like that job's there for the taking. They have all these guys, Marlon Mack, Rex Burkhead, Royce Freeman. I don't think any of those guys are a number 1 fantasy back. Do you?
No, this is kind of the same thing like Jacksonville, just seeing what kind of like lays out. Yeah, you could take a chance on their rookie, but who knows really where they're going with this team.
Even David Johnson, I was doing some research. I mean, he's still on this roster, but was he there last year? Like, he disappeared last year.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think he's with the team, or if he is, he's injured or.
Yeah, big question marks all over the place. So, I mean, the one guy that I would want, well, I mean, the favorite guy is Brandin Cooks, right, from this team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that Brevin Jordan guy, you know, he's a big body 50-50 kind of ball catcher. So that's why he was getting so many targets last year. And with everyone kind of targeting Cooks or even that Nico Collins player, you know, he was always sort of being open as a tight end, as a like a check down look. So definitely someone to keep, I think, always an eye out for. I believe that,
yeah,
for this team. But other than that, you know, I guess it's always good to try and get a starting running back, no matter what team they play on. Mm-hmm. So just keep an eye out through preseason and see who's kind of like winning this job, because by the 3rd preseason game, if they're not playing, then that means they're starting in week 1. So maybe that's a way that you could draft.
Right. And there's only 3 preseason games now, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, because the 4th one got tossed for the last game of the season.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then, you know, keep your eye on Davis Mills. I think he's an up and comer. They didn't draft anyone to replace him, so he'll be the starting QB this year, and I think he's pretty decent. Okay, so you want to talk about some good teams?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, I really like on the Colts. I really like saying Rodrigo Blankenship. So he's their kicker.
Okay.
And I drafted him for fun last year because I like, and he's got the big goggles. Remember, have you seen this guy? He's like,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
comes out.
he got injured at the end part of the year, which kind of like put them in a little bit of a pickle.
I know.
What's that?
I know. It was so disappointing because I just loved, like, just for the comedy. Like, here's my kicker, the guy with the goggles.
Like the wild thing, like the baseball movie with not Christian Slater, with Charlie.
Yeah.
Sheen, with Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
The Cleveland Indians.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I hope I can draft Blankenship as my kicker this year. I hope he's healthy because it's just so much fun to watch.
I think it's funny that you're bringing out of all the Colts players up number one. The one person you just want to talk about is the kicker, because you always give the kickers to me, and so I'm just pretty shocked right now. I've lost my words.
Well, I think the consensus is everybody agrees that Johnathan Taylor is the number one overall pickup for fantasy football this season.
Yeah. I'm still just shaking my head because I just remember when I was going through my ladder last year, he was sitting up there at my next pick, and if I would have had that, it just would have been sweet. But regardless, yeah, Johnathan Taylor is sitting at number one this year, which is great. Yeah, good to see second year back, doing what he should be doing, and that's winning, because usually running backs, as we all know, are very short-lived. So, how many more years do you have with Johnathan Taylor being number one? Maybe a couple. So, yeah, it's good to see him.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would pick up his backup, because they kind of just like to use him as his workhorse, like 20 carries a game. But what's interesting about this team is that they changed their quarterbacks.
Right.
They picked up Matty Ice.
Yeah. Yeah, Matt Ryan. And I mean, I think he's a decent number 2 QB to draft this year. I wouldn't draft him as my number 1 overall QB, but I wouldn't mind having him. He's got that great O-line, right? He's got, the best running back in fantasy football, we're saying, and maybe in the league for real football with Johnathan Taylor. And then people are really high on Michael Pittman Jr. I haven't seen him make a lot of splash plays, but people are quite high on him for fantasy this coming year.
Yeah, he's a second-year player. He did have kind of like a breakout last year, but it's also because their receiving room was kind of a little bit depleted. So, he was catching a lot of the passes, but also their tight end, Ali Cox.
Yeah,
he was actually doing really well as well too, catching a lot of the balls. But their quarterback has changed. So let's see what Matt Ryan, if Matt Ryan loves going downfield, like we've seen him do before, maybe Pittman's your man, right?
Yeah, we had Mo Alley Cox on our tight end list a lot for waivers last season. He's a giant of a player, and I think he's got a lot of potential. It's just, as you said, how's the offense going to click now? It's got a new look. It's got a new QB. Paris Campbell is another receiver there, and T.Y. Hilton. And those are sort of name guys, but they've been underperforming the last couple of years, so I don't trust them.
Yeah, is T.Y. even playing this year?
Well, he's on the roster. I just looked it up before we chatted, so I don't know if he's healthy. I mean, he hasn't been healthy for a while. People call him T.Y. Houston because he seems to only play well against Houston, which is kind of funny. But I mean, I wouldn't roster him based on that. It's only 2 games a year, 2 good games a year. I think we've covered these guys. Frank Reich's a good coach. They brought in Nick Foles as a backup QB to Matt Ryan, so they should be okay one way or the other. Nyheim Hines. I mean, I guess if you draft Johnathan Taylor, you want to get Nyheim Hines also just to cover yourself.
They also picked up Philip Lindsay, I think, too.
Right. Yeah, he's a good player. He's probably better. You're right. He's probably better than Naheem Hines. He's probably going to end up winning the backup role there. Okay, well, so let's talk about the Titans, because this is really the most exciting team in this division, I think.
Exciting, you mean like you think Derrick Henry is worth as a number 2 running back, number 2 off the board?
Yeah, I think, I think he's a guy that is still, he's about to sort of go into the back end of his career. But if you remember, when he started his career with that team, he was the backup to DeMarco Murray. And there wasn't a lot of tread on his tires for the first 2-3 years. I drafted him when he first came into the league because I thought he was going to be a big star. Mm-hmm. And after 2-3 years, I kind of gave up because they weren't giving him the ball. And as soon as I gave up on him, he became a big star. So he got into his career quite a bit before they started giving him the ball. So he doesn't have as much tread on the tires as you'd expect for a guy who's like 27 years old. Mm-hmm. And they don't have much else at running back. They got Dontrell Hilliard.
Well, who filled in for Derrick Henry last year when he got injured?
Everybody.
They just seem to do just fine.
Devontae, which one of the Devontaes was it? He's not on the team anymore.
No, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like their offensive line must be just like, one of the top levels, because anyone could pick a hole and find a hole. It's just with Derrick Henry, you're just looking at another fullback or linebacker sized man running at you. So It makes it a little bit more difficult when he gets to the secondary, which is why a lot of people think he is either like 2 or 3 off the board, right? Or maybe
I agree. I agree with that. I mean, Tyler Lewan is one of the best offensive linemen in the league. He's a great player. The unit as a whole is really good. They make Tannehill, they give him enough time to be a decent player. The guy who won my league last year had Tannehill as his starting quarterback, which I find very surprising, but he's serviceable. They drafted Malik Willis, right? Okay,
so Tannehill, but we look at his receiving core. He had Brown, which is no longer there.
Yeah.
Right? He had Julio. He had so Tannehill was supplied with talent, right? Even their tight ends, like they were he could toss the ball to anyone and he could make fantasy points. But they also just picked up that rookie, which was kind of a surprise too.
Treylon Burks.
No, Malik Williams, who was probably one of the most talked about quarterbacks in the draft this year from the feeds that I've been listening to, because everybody wanted to get the Detroit Lions quarterback out of the picture and thinking that this guy was going to be the next best thing. But obviously, I'm glad that they didn't pick him. But you know what I mean? They drafted a very high quarterback, and they got him in the 3rd round or something crazy like that too. So one of the best quarterbacks in this year's class, which was supposedly the worst class in 20 years, has gone to this team. So there's a competition between Tannehill, but I think Tannehill will ultimately win the job, and this guy would just be sitting around until next year or a couple of years back. But you also got to put that key factor in. This guy's a little young, can run with the ball, can have deep balls throw. So I do believe Tannehill has the job, but this Malik Williams character is, he's kind of also nipping at the heels of Tannehill.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the San Francisco 49ers last season, where they had Trey Lance and they had Jimmy Garoppolo. And the way I think it's going to play out is Tannehill will start. And if the team is competitive, he will probably fend off Malik Willis throughout the season, the way Garoppolo did last year with Trey Lance. However, if they start to suck and they have a lot of injury problems, I think somewhere through the season, they'll transition to the young guy because of all the things you said about him. He's got good wheels and he's a promising talent. He's probably physically a lot more talented than Tannehill.
And he has a deep ball threat, which Tannehill really doesn't really show off too often.
Yeah.
But who knows? Sometimes those deep ball threats get intercepted there's one thing about being accurate
Yeah.
that really does a lot with fantasy, right? We don't need turnovers.
Well, because they've got Derrick Henry, they've got the play action pass that's what makes that deep ball so effective with that team, is that you always have to worry about Derrick Henry because he can take it to the house in one carry, 99 yards. He's done that before. And they got rid of AJ Brown, but they drafted a guy who everybody says is just like AJ Brown, Treylon Burks, who we were talking about a little earlier at wide receiver. This guy's one of the top favorite picks of the wide receivers this year. And he's going to be the one who's going to get all that work that AJ Brown was getting.
They also have Robert Woods too, right? So
yeah,
they got a good 1-2 if this Burks guy plays out to what he's supposed to, right?
Yeah.
So they do have, but they also drafted a ton of wide receivers. So this is kind of like almost like a committee, I think, to really watch. Like pick the guys that they're going to produce, like Robert Woods and Treylon Burks, right? But really keep an eye on all those secondary receivers, third receivers that are going to fight for the roster spot, because they did draft they had a lot of drafts this year. They picked up a lot of players. Yeah,
well, I mean, Robert Woods is a really good run blocker too. So I keep going back to Derrick Henry. I mean, sure, if Johnathan Taylor's the number 1 overall back going into the season, I think Henry might be the number 2 overall pick this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, just how he's been working his workout course the last 2 years, coming off an injury. His workout regime is like something to take note of. And so yeah, he's going to be back full strength. Probably even stronger. Let's see where he goes. So
yeah, I like him. Even though he doesn't catch too many balls, he
can catch though.
Yeah.
He can catch, though. It's not like he has bricks for hands.
No, that's true. That's true. We didn't mention Austin Hooper, the tight end, but he's a decent player. He's on this team now. And I guess we need to see what they look like with all these new pieces that you were talking about. I mean, we just don't know what it looks like. I think it's just going to be a lot of handing the ball off to Henry and some play action shots.
Yeah. And their defense hasn't changed much going into this year. So they did a lot of kind of like adding pieces to the offense or like whatever, but their core defense has stayed the same. So looking at a defense, maybe Dupree is going to do like an outstanding year, or who knows what's going to happen. But it's just something to keep an eye on, because you're always trying to find a defense to draft reasonably well, and this team may be a contender.
Yeah, they're good. I mean, they're a good defense, and they get the ball back for their offense a lot, which helps the offensive players on this team for fantasy too. So I don't see them getting knocked off. Like, they won the division last year, and I feel like they're going to do it again this year, unless some unforeseen injury bug bites their team. But I like them. I think they're going to be really good this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be a competitive division between 2 of the 4 teams.
Yeah.
But you never know. Houston always does surprise you. You think they always have just like a mediocre team, and they kind of sometimes squeak through those wins. So
yep, I like their coach. I like Lovie Smith. He's coached in the Super Bowl before. He's a great coach, and wish him luck. I hope they can get competitive.
Yeah,
down in Houston. Okay, who do we have next time?
I think we go east now, because we've done north, we've done south, so let's go east.
Okay.
And,
sounds good.
And then we'll finish up with probably one of the strongest divisions in the NFL, the AFC West.
Okay. Good. That's a good place to wrap up the off season and take a break before we start doing some drafting shows.
Yeah, like just think about it. The AFC West and the NFC West, those 2 divisions are so stacked. It's like everyone just wants to be on the West Coast now. Better than playing for Dallas.
There we go again. I'm sure no Cowboy fans watch this.
It doesn't matter if they want to win; they should listen to this. It doesn't matter about who your team is, who you root for.
Yeah.
No, you just don't get. You know what? Every other show praises the Giants and praises the Cowboys like they're the best thing to ever hit the market. There has to be a show that just poos on both those two teams. Because
yeah, I'm surprised we don't get more hate mail. Maybe it's coming.
Oh yeah, hopefully. I've got an inbox for
that. Okay, well, thanks for doing this with me, and look forward to next time.
Okay, talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for watching the Fantasy Football Game Plan podcast. Need coaching on your lineup? Drop us a line, and we'll discuss your dilemma.